Let's see. Oh, I think we're live. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning.
This is Dr. Annalisa Durr and my co-hostess with the mostest, Dr. Andreas Leminski. And we're here with our lovely returning guest, Dr. Tamsin Lee. Hello, Dr.
Hello.
Tamsin.
Good
Hello. I'm
morning. Good
so glad to
morning.
be so glad to be back.
Yeah, we're really, really excited to have you here. Okay, this says waiting for us to start, but we're live. So, um, Anyway, so we're really excited to have you here to talk about something that's quite important to both me and Dr. Andrea, and that
I think we're live. Good morning, everybody.
really specifically, there we were getting a little echo of ourselves, that really specifically dovetails with Dr. Andrea's work. She also works in the menopause space and mythology. But but so that aside, we're going to get into the meat and bones of it in just a second. But we're going to give a brief intro here to Dr. Tamsin. She is an East Asian medical doctor and metaphysical expert. And we're going to explore what that means and how that both aligns with the Western perspective, but also differs, so that people can have maybe a more holistic view of their perimenopausal and menopausal experience. And I want to have people walk away feeling enlivened and excited, and maybe having some more tools in their toolbox. So, just a reminder to everybody at home, please share, please leave a comment. We're in the live chat with you. Dr. A or I will read your questions from time to time. And if you have any questions for Dr. Tamsin, this would be a great time. You can ask them live with us. So let's get straight in. So as most of us are aware, in the West, we typically treat menopause and perimenopause, but menopause more broadly like an ending. Women feel things like they're dried up, they're ignored, and society seems to treat us as if we're irrelevant. But from an Eastern medical perspective, as I've learned from Dr. Tamsin, menopause is considered a time of renewal. You explain it like a second spring. And I was reflecting on that this morning. I was like, I love this idea of renewal because it aligns so well with mythology and all of these goddess myths, right? Like the myth of Demeter and Persephone and the goddess I work with, Inanna. So it so fits in with this kind of divine feminine wisdom that we're trying to bring forward on the show. So, with all of that in mind, can you please tell us what perimenopause and menopause is from an Eastern medical perspective, and then how you specifically apply it in your work with clients?
Yes, I'm so excited to learn from both of you too, because these are conversations that I don't get to have. You know, when you look at social media, perimenopause, menopause is just everyone's talking about it, right? So there's already a cultural shift that we're talking about this as opposed to a few years ago where these topics weren't talked about in public. And so, but a lot of the things in from the Western lens is really looking at menopause as a pathology, like almost like there are these symptoms and it needs to be diagnosed and then we need to fix it and we need to, stop the hot flashes, stop the joint pain, all of this, right? Which are important. But in East Asian medicine, it's more about supporting the body because menopause is just another natural evolution in life. It's just a progression in life, a transition in life. And it isn't the ending. There's something that happens at post-menopause, which I haven't heard a lot of discussion around in terms of the Western lens, but that's where the second spring really happens. It's after menopause, this renewal, when you're no longer fertile, but that energy of creativity and life is still within you. So I feel like that's the main difference, that we don't pathologize it. It's not a disease. It is a natural progression of life. So how we approach it is how do we support the body so that it can move through this transition so that you can thrive in the next stage, which is post-menopause. And what I do is I work with clients with metaphysics. So it's Bazi astrology, which is East Asian astrology, Daoist face reading, which is looking at the face and seeing how what are the strengths, the challenges, obstacles that we have, and how can we support our growth by looking at our face, and a lot of ancestral stories, so a lot of ancestral and family healing. And then also with seasonal living. So certain things that we need to do throughout the season to support our body.
Wow.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's so much that we have in common, right? In the overlap of the work and in our perspective. Yeah, menopause is having a huge moment right now, right? And it's interesting because and I'd love to hear what you feel about this from your perspective, is that um in my work, looking at the whole peri-menopause through midlife, menopause, post-menopause, I look at it as a triple transformation and a unique life stage that women go through. And so in my work, I focus on three things. One is the physical transformation, right? Which is the hormones and all of that. And the other is the psychological shift into the midlife stage of psychological development, right? Which is a whole shift in perspective, often a shift in meaning, purpose, and belonging in our lives. And then those two sort of interact to create what I consider to be a spiritual shift, right? In how we look at ourselves and our lives and our legacy and all those kinds of things. And though menopause is having a moment, and I support it, and it's great, and there's more incredible information, more new medical studies, more new advances in treatment, all these different things, I'm afraid that once again it's becoming a complete focus on the body, right? On women's bodies, because it's always been about women's bodies and women's bodies, how they're perceived and treated and valued in patriarchal systems, and that there's not a lot of emphasis on the psychological and the spiritual. So I think maybe from your metaphysical perspective, you may be working in those realms as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. These are conversations I have in my own head alone. So to be with both of you who are you know, who are in a different field, but are we have the same approach to seeing things, and this is how traditional cultures have seen this transition. And that is I think that is the biggest challenge for me when I'm trying to share this work publicly online, is that I find that a lot of women are really focused on the physical symptoms, and they're searching for answers. But we live in an age where it's like information overload. There's too much information. And what I want to support women is to really get into their own body and connect with their spiritual and emotional transition. And because this is really a spiritual initiation. And so during perimenopause, when our hormones are being chaotic, our hair is falling, and we have this weight gain, all of this, it's an initiation. We're supposed to go through these challenges to recalibrate and reassess our life, so that in that post-menopause phase, we're living, that's our last chance in life. That's our last chapter. And so we get to do the things that we really want to do. And so I think that's the biggest misunderstanding, that we look at these symptoms as like, oh my gosh, I'm going to feel, and it is challenging, insomnia, pain, weight gain, all of this is challenging, but to reframe it and see, okay, this is my body telling me that I need to reassess my life. I need to reassess my priorities. I need to really connect with what is happening spiritually so that I can make this initiation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because I have women in my practice, that some who do not want to do any kind of hormone replacement therapy, and some who have so many indicators. I don't like to call them symptoms because it's not a pathology, right? Have so many indicators, and that they just want relief and are anxious and happy and delighted to try different different hormone replacement therapies, which are very different now than they were at the time of the Women's Health Initiative. Um, and I still come back to the same thing, that even if you are able to resolve your indicators, the hormone replacement therapy isn't going to help you go through the reassessment that the life stage invites you to go through, right? And so that is sometimes, I think, more of a challenge, because there's not a pill for it.
Yes. Yeah.
right?
I also want to touch back to something you said when you explained to us how you apply this work with your clients. You brought up the ancestral, and I think, of course, there's a lot of talk in the biomedicalization of our bodies about genes and hereditary things like breast cancer, et cetera, et cetera. But I get the sense that that's not exactly all of it when we're talking about ancestry. So, can you share with us how ancestry fits into this whole picture as well?
Yeah, I work on ancestral healing in terms of the the things that we carry from our ancestors. Really understanding, like, is this my own issue? Is this my own challenge now, or is this an ancestral story that I'm carrying into this lifetime? And also reconnecting with your ancestral roots. So I do work with a lot of Asians who were born here, second, third, fourth generation, who feel disconnected to their Asian culture, and trying to understand what how to reconnect, reassess, right? And or I'll work with a lot of other people of color who have a disconnection with their culture, and really connecting with their ancestral heritage. So something simple as food. Food is the best way to connect with your ancestors. It's in our blood. There's something that happens when we eat the food from our culture, and so really understanding. I think perimenopause is a great time because it's things start bubbling up, things that we've suppressed, repressed, our social conditioning, our family conditioning. This is what the recalibration is all about. So things start to come up, and you need to really understand, like, is this my own thing? Is it a family thing? Is it an ancestral thing? And then from there, we can figure out how to work with this.
Oh my God. Go ahead, Ray. Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just think that one of the things is that biology, right, is so intricately woven in the psychology of living life as an embodied woman, that a woman's life experience is fundamentally different and completely separate from what men experience. And every month we go through these hormonal cycles, right, when we're menstruating. And then, as you said, when the hormones start to get a little, scrambled, right, during perimenopause and these sorts of things, the uh the hormones that are part of the instinctual drive to protect the tribe, protect the home, keep things moving forward, make things happen, keep the family going, keep the business going, whatever it is, right? Which is part of that estrogen cycle, right? I mean, once a month when we're menstruating, we we get an inkling into that what about me, right? As the estrogen falls off and the progesterone rises. But then once we get into that perimenopause, right? As you said, Dr. Tamsin, a lot of the things that we've put on the back burners, a lot of the things that we haven't been able to tend to for ourselves, a lot of the issues that we've put aside, a lot of the slights, a lot of the resentments, a lot of the unsaid, right, starts to emerge because that instinctual process, right, is changing.
Mhm.
Yeah, that instinctual hormonal process is changing.
Yeah, I was reading I was reading about the conservation of angular momentum yesterday, as one does. I was just, on social media, and I just went on this deep dive of physics. But metaphysics is physics. There's a lot of laws around physics that can explain these more spiritual, esoteric things. And so I was reading up on this law, and I was like, wow, this is exactly what we go through in perimenopause in terms of how East Asian medicine looks at it. So the conservation of angular momentum talks about how ice skaters are an example. When they have their arms out, they can slow down the speed of rotation. But then when they bring their arms inwards, they go faster. And but it's the same energy within them. And so what's happening in perimenopause, or before perimenopause, is that we've been living like this, rotating outwards, right? And then perimenopause and menopause is a time of containment. It's a time to be introspective. It's a time to bring that energy inwards so that internally that same energy is now cultivated and gets stronger so that you can make that transition into second spring. And so when we're bringing that energy inwards, that's when we start to realize I've been giving myself this whole time, through our career, our relationships, kids, everything that women have to just constantly give, give, give. And this is really the time to really go inwards. And I think that's one of the challenges, because it really starts to make you question or reflect things that you may have difficulty accepting, taking accountability, recognizing, acknowledging. There are themes around shame and guilt, and also a lot of grief. And we live in a culture that doesn't know how to grieve. And I love how, Dr. A, you were talking about the menstrual cycle, because the whole time we've been having a menstrual cycle, that is our monthly practice of grieving. But we don't even treat that as a sacred grief practice. So then when we get to perimenopause and our body is changing, we don't know how to grieve the loss and look forward into something that, grief just doesn't end. There's something afterwards.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
What you just said really brought up something. Reading about ritual yesterday, as we all do every day, I'm taking a cue from you, right? I'm putting together the materials for a workshop on Thursday, and what you were talking about in terms of how we're meant to go through this change, this concentration, this coming back together in ourselves is. I came back to the writing of Bruce Lincoln, who was a ritualist and a anthropologist, and he had done a number of different studies on ritual, and of course the old Van Gennep theory of initiation, separation, and reintegration, right? The three steps of the ritual process in terms of rite of initiation. And Bruce Lincoln was researching women's ritual initiation process, and he said this is much different. And he said, just quoting, he says, a result of this study of female initiation in 5 cultures, he suggests a form of structure for women which is different, which is enclosure, metamorphosis or magnification, and emergence.
Wow.
And this is, I think, very much embedded in the old kind of world, what we might call the red tent, that red tent idea that was put forward by Anita Diamond.
Yeah.
Diamond. What's the book called? The Red Tent? I
The
think
red
so.
tent, yeah.
Red tent, yeah.
And us trying to replicate, or, some people trying to replicate that, the spirit of that in the modern world. But I think built into that structure in a lot of traditional cultures, and I think it still exists in some traditional cultures, right, is that idea of separation from the pack. You go into the red tent during your liminal phase, your menstrual phase, your birthing and postpartum phase, right? Traditionally, I think a lot of cultures, you get 40 days around that after the birthing process. And then you come out of the red tent revitalized, renewed, reborn. And that is something that we've lost. And I think that I want to kind of segue a little bit to perimenopause specifically, because it's actually a very long transition with no clear beginning. And I'm not sure if there's a clear end. I don't know, because I'm not at the end yet, but I'm in the transitional phase. And the last 6 months are still, I can really feel that I'm in it. And talking with other women that are in it, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm experiencing that too. No. So there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of feelings like, oh, my body's betraying me, or I don't recognize myself. But because we have this lack of initiation or a structure to help us navigate this separation of who I was before, a recognition of I'm in this liminal undoing stage, this dismembering, and this inability to show us what's on the other side in a coherent, meaningful way. It really feels like touching back into these traditional metaphysical perspectives, like the one that you work within, is maybe maybe an answer, maybe the way to help us find a way to make meaning of this initiatory phase that so many of us are just struggling with.
Yeah, I think it gives you an understanding of why we go through this. But even with myself, I'm in perimenopause now too. You know, even though I have the the knowledge, it is challenging. It's because we don't have the community, the tribe. We don't have the guide, the wise guide that can, the wise older woman who can, or groups of older women who can teach us, who can guide us through this initiation. And I've been thinking a lot about like why that is. And, you know, it always goes back to patriarchy because there is nothing more fear based, scary for the patriarchy than powerful older women who are awakened. Daoist medicine also says, you know, the older woman is also sexually awakened because all of that a creative energy is now inwards too. So you get an older woman who has wisdom, who knows herself, who has made the spiritual initiation. I mean, that is so powerful. So of course we have a culture that started creating all these narratives to keep her, you know, hidden or keep her outside of the tribe and to disconnect women from each other so that we don't know how to connect with one another and support one another and share the wisdom and teach others and be in community. Yeah. So I find that that is what's lacking. And you know, like Dr. A mentioned, all these conversation around menopause from the Western lens, there is some sort of tribe happening, but they don't have that spiritual component. And that is so important because all of us are going through this, and there are similarities in our journey, but it's also very unique to the individual. And that's why you need a guide. You can't have an expert telling you what to do. You need a guide to facilitate and guide you through this initiation so that you start understanding your own journey and start making decisions based on your journey.
Absolutely. I want to go back and then I want to come back to that because I'm like, oh, this is great. Okay. So one of the things that I want to kind of drop into the conversation, not just for you or commenting on you, but for people who are watching, is that one of the reasons that that we don't have the guides, the roadmaps, the road signs, the understanding of how to move through this is that in the US, let's just say in the US, in the year 1900, the average white woman statistically was dead by 51 and women of color by 43. So starting with boomers and all the women following, we are the first women in the history of humanity to go through the menopause transition as a generational cohort. It has never happened before. Individual women in families lived to be wise old grandmothers. It's since the time of Plato. But never before have entire generations of women moved from perimenopause into midlife, through menopause, and into postmenopause together. It's never happened before. So we're creating these maps. The three of us, whoever is working in this field, are creating the maps, the road signs, the way markers to show how to move through this. And to bring it back to what you just said and to what Dr. Nicola is commenting in the comments, is that, yeah, we need wise women to create ritual, to create process, to help us create community where we can go through these processes of grieving, as Annalisa says, or understanding or grappling with the changes that we're going through. And it's not just effective ritual is not just a one-time thing, right? It's the space of change that we have to move into, accept, and go through and continually come back to, because it like Annalisa said, it's for some women, the process can be 15 or 20 years. For some can get to menopause in 3 years, some in 5. But even the menopause moment where you haven't bled for a year and you don't bleed again, It's just menopause is just that moment. Everything after it, being post-menopause, is still filled with change and hormonal redistribution and realignment. And it's 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 a it's an initiatory process that you can't get through one and done.
I just want to jump in here and just say one little thing before you respond, Dr. Lee, if that's okay.
Yeah.
When I was putting together, or when we were putting together the questions for you, and we were, it was based on some talks that you already gave on TikTok, and you mentioned something about community, and it just popped into my mind because this is something I also talk about with regard to my work with menstruation. But I'd never framed it in this particular way until I heard you speak about community, is that we're lacking this sense of sacred togetherness and journeying together through this initial phase as perimenopausal women moving into menopause, but also with this. I don't want to say there's a complete lack of guides above us, because there aren't. I have women in my life, but it's very unstructured. It's very unstructured. So it's like, how do we constitute this sacred togetherness as part of the communal aspect of perimenopause and menopause? That would be something that I would pose to you. How do you feel like we could create that, or start to create that, threads of it maybe?
I have no idea. I am doing it on my own with clients. I'm moving more in that direction to work with groups of women to support that. But I think this is still very new. Like Dr. A said, like there hasn't been these cohorts that move together in this. And then spirituality is one of the last things that we really think about. But I think it needs to go back, actually working with young women from their first period and creating the tribe from there. Because I think about in middle school, high school, when I had my periods, like the conversation around that was like, oh, I can't believe I had my period again, all the cramps, it's so gross. It's never looked at as this beautiful thing where you get to, first of all, you have to rest during, in East Asian medicine, we say you rest during the time you're bleeding, because you're shedding, and also just the idea that this is actually an incredible sacred thing that happens every month, that you get to experience death and rebirth every single month. And there is something that shifts. And the archetype for the women who are menstruating is actually the phoenix in East Asian metaphysics. And that is, when you think of the phoenix, it's this fiery, beautiful bird that just burns, and it goes through that death and rebirth cycle. And so I've been seeing people working in that space, working with young women and young people that do menstruate, and really changing that narrative and helping them understand that this is an incredible, powerful thing that you get to go through every single month. So that's exciting to me, to work with young adults in that space. But
we have no celebratory
Menarche ritual.
Yeah, menarche ritual for young women. It's seen as something to be, shameful, or something that, and this is your work, Annalisa, shameful, or something to be hidden, something, whatever. There's no celebratory thing of, now look, we have another woman in the tribe, and look at the power of creation, and the power of the goddess is living among us, and we have another creatrix in our midst. And I mean, none of this happens. And so there's no understanding around it, because as Jung would say, we've stopped living in the myth. We've stopped living in the power of what it means to be an embodied woman, and what all these cycles are, and how, like you had said, in patriarchal culture, all of these are set aside as less than, because male is human, female is other, and anything to do with the female is less than other, right? So,
And something to be managed and controlled and contained. And
Yeah.
I think we should just kind of transition back to perimenopause and menopause for a second. And you brought up the image of the phoenix
Mhm.
for women in their menstrual years, but there's this powerful image you introduced to us last time you were on the show, which is the white tigress. So
Yeah.
I'd love it if you could speak to the white tigress and this idea of what it means to deepen into feminine power.
So a lot of these archetypes has to do with the seasons. Each season has its own energy, and perimenopause and menopause is this time of what we say autumn and winter season, so metal and water season, and it's about letting go, surrendering, and being introspective and containing. And then what happens is at the postmenopause, this is your second spring, and this is where the white tiger energy comes in. But the thing with this is you don't, not everyone gets to experience that archetype. You know, you have to go through the initiation to be that. And it's such a Western way of like, oh, I like that image. I like that archetype. I want it. But no, you have to go through that surrendering. You have to go through that containment inwards. And then the white tiger really embodies wisdom, this enlightened wisdom that you can only get through this journey of self-discovery, of this evolution.
I had this other thought this morning, like why white? And then I was like, okay, there could be a practical reason for the white tiger, like maybe the only tigers are white in China. I don't know. But, traditionally, when we're looking at color symbolism in a spiritual and religious context, white equates to purity. And it's not always just sexual purity. It literally, in the research I've done, means like a like you're so undefiled. I'm using like these religious terms, but there is this purity of sense, purity of self, in which you are able to connect more deeply to the divine. So there's a sense of wholeness and maybe sovereignty, not sexual purity. So I'm wondering if that sense of wholeness, white as purity equating to wholeness, might have something to do with the white tigress symbolism.
It's more white. So the seasons also have colors. We have colors, temperature, organs, emotions, all associated with the seasons. And that's part of our diagnosis. Um, and so white is actually the color of autumn, color of metal. And
Oh,
metal represents clarity. And it's that enlightened clarity. It's that thing that you can only get through self-discovery. And in Korean mythology, so my background is my ethnicity is Korean. We have all these mythologies of tigers because that's the animal for Korea. That is our origin story. And one of the mythologies is that the white tiger is the one that reaches enlightenment. So there aren't that many white tigers in the jungle, and so that makes it even more special. So it has a lot to do with the autumn season, the metal season of letting go, surrendering, unfolding. That begins at perimenopause, and then it goes through postmenopause.
wow. But it's not like men at this stage in their life, they don't get a tiger symbolism. They have a different symbol.
They have a different, and that is lost in our discussion, even in my field. Men go through their own transition, and what they start off as, we call it the green dragon. So that's teenage 20s, 30s, 40s, and their transition is to become the black tortoise. And so that's their archetype. And you, I can talk forever about masculine energy and how this is playing out in our culture. Um, but sometimes you do see men who've made that transition, and you don't have to know anything about Eastern mythology. You know, if you think about what black tortoise is like, their tortoise live for a long time. They're massive creatures and they move slow. But again, it's that wisdom, is that enlightenment that they go through. And it is it's a different it's a masculine energy. It's different, but it's different than the white tiger. You know, if you just like sit with the body and think of that image of a white tiger and a black tortoise, and then you can really understand how our transition, our feminine masculine transitions.
Wow.
It's so interesting because oftentimes I talk to my clients when they're talking about the dynamics of their relationships or their marriage or their partners or whatever, as they go through the perimenopause and the midlife process together, that oftentimes what happens is during this period, men who've been out in the world and out working or doing whatever they want, and women who've been maybe nurturing a family, maybe a career, maybe both, whatever. Men at this time sort of want to come in, want to come home, want to land, want to leave, and women coming into this menopause are ready to relaunch, to go do something new, and so they're passing each other. And I
Yeah.
see that in the energy symbolism between becoming the white tiger and becoming the tortoise, right?
Yeah. And that's why in Taoist medicine, when we talk about sexual health and sexual desire, and you see it in culture now, older women dating or having relationships with younger men. This has always been kind of in the Taoist sexual traditions, the white tiger and the green dragon. That and it's because they're both on this surge of spring, of new awakenings, and so their energy aligns much more better than than the white tiger and the black tortoise, who's moving slow, and
But then that would mean the converse, right? That there's the black tortoise would then align with the younger women who are in their phoenix years.
more of the when we talk about Taoist sexual traditions, it's more focused on the women's
Okay.
sexual health.
Okay.
What the black tortoise is supposed to do is actually conserve that sexual energy within themselves. But we also don't see that. We see older men with younger women; they can't keep up. They can't keep up. The younger women want to go out. They want to. Their sexual energy is on the rise, and so but older women are able to keep up. You see an increase in sexual desire as women age, and culture now is just starting to pick up on that.
I, Andre, maybe you can speak to this too. I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about sexuality in these white tigress years, because sometimes, I hear menopausal women express that they have lost sexual desire, or it's more challenging because of maybe vaginal dryness, or all of the biological, psychological, or maybe they're just fed up with men. Okay, that's a reality too.
Both and. Can we do
Yeah.
both and?
And shout out to our, lesbian sisters as well. I don't, you probably have your own dealings, right?
Yeah.
That don't include men in that way. So what would be the Eastern metaphysical perspective to that, to
So
sexuality
I
and
love talking about this because, yes, obviously the physical symptoms, and that's something to work with, right? But desire, there's also a shift in sexual desire. When we're younger, sex is more about, again, outwards, validation. We're not taught to please ourselves or to have the man please us, and so it's all about performing and being more visual and validating their experience. What happens during perimenopause is that shifts, and it's I often ask the question with women who say that their sexual desires are declining. Is it declining, or is it now you have to understand what it feels, how it feels different in your body? Maybe you'll need to go a little bit more slow. Maybe there needs to be a lot more foreplay. Maybe intimacy begins outside before the foreplay, when you're waking up in the morning and asking, how are you? Maybe that's what desire looks like now. And so it's that, again, we don't have support on how sexual desire shifts, and and really going back into our own body. Like intimacy, it doesn't really start at foreplay. It actually starts way before. It's, asking about how your day was and connecting with the person that increases that sexual desire. So that's something new that I've been working with clients, is asking, is it really a decline, or is it just shifting?
Yeah, I think that's such a valid point, because when women go through perimenopause and we have that shift, and we have the recognition of for lack of a better phrase, it's my turn, right? Maybe the kids are about to leave, or you're thinking maybe you want to change your jobs, or you've been in a situation for a long time and you're waking up to something that, well, now I need to get my needs met, and I what's been going on for a long time I've put up with, but I don't want to put up with this anymore. And so if a woman is in a relationship that has become rote or has become, predictable, and she feels that intimacy in the terms of soul connection, in the terms of being seen, being known, being understood, having her feelings, dreams, goals, ideas being treasured, being important to listen to, being important to engage with, right? If that's not happening, right, then the woman is going to feel not seen. She's not going to feel that she's being connected to, and that intimate connection, right, on a soul level, I'm finding with my clients, when that is not there, the sexual desire is really not there, right? The sexual impulse to that. Um, and so, yes, hormone replacement therapy and different treatments that have come out in the past few years, for the gyno-urinary syndrome of menopause, for the musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause, for the traditional hot flashes, night sweats, aches and pains, vaginal dryness, painful intercourse. All of these can be addressed, right, through bioidentical transdermal hormone therapy. But even if you add, say, testosterone to your prescriptions, if the soul connection is not there, if the intimate connection is not there, if you do not feel seen, heard, appreciated, respected, loved, right, it's going to be very, very difficult to rekindle that sexual spark, right? That
Mm-hmm.
deep desire.
I also think about erotic energy and how in our culture it's not safe for women to explore their erotic energy that is so powerful. So at a young age, you learn very quickly that your sexuality, your erotic energy, your body doesn't belong to you. And so, women play that out very differently, and boys and young men are conditioned very differently. So then, when we get to that age where we start to have a little bit more power and more agency, that part of ourself, that erotic energy, we don't really know how to work with, and so, yeah, it's not a safe place really to explore that in our culture.
Yeah. And I think like, to your point, Andrea, like, I don't, that's something we should want throughout our lives from the point we start dating young men or, women, whatever your, sexual status is, um, until the end. Like, I don't think it's something we should just expect, in our menopausal years, but I want that now.
Yeah,
Like, I wanted that 5 years ago.
yeah.
That's something that's very prevalent in our generation, Tamsin, too. I mean, we are like, that is our standard. Like, most of us are saying we don't want anything but that in order to move into
Yeah.
marriage, for example.
Yeah, I would say
Um,
that's true, but and you may both have had a different experience than I did, but I know that in my younger years, when I was fully fertile and fully menstruating, there were times when the hormone load, right, was a sexual cue, right? Was what was made it so that, like, oh, I'm really feeling like, like I want to have sex tonight, or I'm really feeling like I want to make love, or I'm whatever you want to say, right? Where what was going on in the systems in the body itself, in a sense, had its own desire, right? That, yes, of course, having the devoted partner and having all these sorts of things, right, was important. But when in the post-menopause or even in the perimenopause stage, when that biological cue is no longer a trigger, right, then
mhm.
I think the other things become become the gateway, Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Yeah. One thing I've been working with clients too also is like you don't actually need a man to have sex with, you know. And so learning how to have sex with yourself. What does sex feel like for yourself when you do it for yourself? What does pleasure feel like when you do it for yourself? And that's a whole other conversation because there are some women who've never experienced that or explored that, you know, what feels good in your own body when you do it to your own body. And that's a whole other thing that, but I really love exploring that with clients because these are questions that, you know, I think in our generation that wasn't really talked about. I think maybe in the younger generation they talk about it more, but
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to just, Dr. Nikki has been such a warrioress in our chat. So I want to acknowledge that she's also said, thank the goddess for Dr. A's Women's Wisdom Village, which was, I think, connected back to our conversation about community and sacred togetherness. And that's true. You are doing that, Dr. Andrea. Um, and then she also says there's a trend on social media of mom influencers who are posting on their daughter's first menarche, which cool. I didn't know that they were. And she's also very thankful that you brought in the Korean mythology on this subject, Dr. Tamsin. So
oh,
thank you. Um, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt the flow, but I wanted to bring her voice in here again. Yeah, and I love this. I think that it would be great to have another conversation later on, specifically geared on erotic energy. It's something I bring up in my book as well, borrowing from a mystical perspective, where it's not just about sexuality, it's about aliveness and vibrancy and vitality, where like you can literally experience the smell of a flower as an erotic, alive experience.
yeah.
So I think we should bookmark you to, you know, and you have you other people to come on and talk about eroticism on another episode.
I do. We have a similar thing of that. It's creativity. It's that fertile energy too. That's how we look at it. It's life, you know. So that creative energy doesn't just disappear at postmenopause or at menopause when you're no longer fertile. You're meant to continue creating, and one way of creating is connecting with that erotic energy. And so that energy still stays within you, but it's the last thing that you put out into the world that will, well, we say it leaves your legacy, you know, the things that will grow after you pass.
Yeah.
Yeah, which aren't just children, is what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. I mean, really thinking about it in some senses, um, and this brings me back to the idea of the white energy, the metal energy, the idea of alchemy, right? With the black, red, and white, right? The white is the emergence of the new, and that whole thinking of erotic energy is that initial energy to pull in to pull in the possibility of creation, right? If we think of it from its initial sense of creating new life, right? In terms of conception, but just because the womb is not bleeding, right? Or the womb is not going through menstruation, that doesn't mean that the impulse to create, to bring in something new through that initial heat, right? That erotic, that sexual energy, right? Constellates still constellates a creative energy within the female body, right? Whether
Mhm.
it's autoeroticism or whether it's with someone else.
Or you just get on the dance floor and you just start like moving your body
Yeah.
and dancing,
Yes.
or you want to
Yeah.
paint a picture, or you know, teach your grandchild how to make your favorite, I don't know, dumplings. I mean, I don't know. There's just so many different ways that that erotic creative impulse could manifest itself at any time. But I think, you know, we are talking about perimenopause and menopause. Um, so yeah, I think that this is such a rich topic. I'm so glad you brought that in to the conversation, Tamsin.
Yeah. It's yeah, it's lost, you know, and I think with that also the notion of sensuality is also lost because when you were saying like, you know, dance or eat, you know, these are all sensual things. And again, these are all things that happen when you bring your energy inwards. But we live in a culture where during perimenopause time, you're constantly still giving, you know, you're hustling, you're moving fast, even, and when your body's telling you slow down, you need to slow down, we don't want to slow down, we want to keep going, keep moving. I mean, personally yesterday I was thinking I was at the gym and I was like, wow, I can't work out as hard as I was able to a year ago. And there was some grief that I had to go through when I was walking back to the gym. I'm like, I
Mm.
need to adjust my workout. But I don't want to. I want to keep working out at the same level, at the same intensity. But my body is saying, no, you can't do that. And so, all these stories around, well, how will I have my body? How will I stay healthy? So it's our attachment to the old life. But the harder and stronger that we hold on to that, that transition into menopause is going to be much more challenging because we're
Right.
carrying so much.
Exactly. We were talking about this last night in my Santa Cruz Valley women's circle. It's an in-person thing I do in my town, talking about everything peri to post, right? And and the women who are in perimenopause, heading towards menopause, younger, like in their mid 40s, are like, oh, there's so many, women I know, they don't even want to talk about it. They don't want to, they don't want to, have these discussions or whatever, and some do and some don't. And I said, yeah, I think sometimes the women who don't want to talk about it are realizing and facing and seeing the changes like that you're talking about, like a working out or whatever it is in their bodies, and they're still feeling like they're at their prime, they're at their height, they're really doing it in their field, and they're going out there, and they don't want to realize that though they've hit their stride, in a woman's life, change is her middle name, right? That this change is going to happen. It's coming. If you live long enough, you're going to go through it. And women who are high achievers sometimes don't want to face it. They don't. They're like, no, just, one woman was sharing that she had a friend who was very highly educated, very motivated, big career woman, and rather than looking at the whole cadre of symptoms and things that she was going through, right, including frozen shoulder and a number of things that are classic perimenopause symptoms, she would opt to have surgery and have this and do all these things, and refused to look at it as something that is part of a natural, normal transition. That's the next stage of her life, because if that's the case, then she sees it as a series of losses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, oh, sorry, Tamsin. You want to speak to that?
Oh, as you were talking, I was thinking of another social media trend. I don't know if you guys noticed this one. It's the ugly 40s trend. Have you seen that? It's these women who have reached their 40 and they just feel ugly. And that's their thing. It's like, I feel ugly. I know I'm not ugly, but I feel ugly. And and so they're doing all these things, they're which is fine. They're doing all the superficial things, getting their hair cut, but there's something spiritually that's happening, and I think that is a resistance. It's like there is this shift that's happening, and you can no longer look and get back and have the same body and have the same routine as you did in the past. And so I think for me, at least, when I was going through this transition earlier, it was really that fear of my own mortality. It's like, now I get to see, like, I'm mortal, that death is here. I'm seeing it in my own body, and that's very hard to deal with.
Andrea, you're
Oh,
muted.
sorry. I was gonna say that's the midlife shift psychological part that nobody wants to talk about.
Yeah. Okay. I have something I want to say, but I'm going to let you finish, Dr. Tamsin. Are you okay? Can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Um, I think this goes back to the the reality of menstruation in Western culture, where we don't honor the cycles because women, especially high achieving women who are, I am one myself, enculturated by our culture to be linear go-getters and with this drive that doesn't respect or honors the cyclical nature of our beings. So if we actually lived in a culture that actually allowed us and taught us how to grieve, to let go every month, our body gives us the opportunity to understand how to um, grieve, let go, rest for a couple days every month, if we had that embodied wisdom for the 40 years that we're bleeding, it might actually help us understand the transition into perimenopause and menopause differently because we'd have that encultured, embodied way of knowing already inside of us.
Yeah. And I think that would help us bringing it back to our mortality, understanding, have less fear around it.
Yeah.
And all of this is really supposed to help us make that last transition in life, you know, and we get to experience it every month, and we get to experience it during this perimenopause, menopause cycle, so that when we do make that last transition, it's with ease, and we're not holding on to this life so hard. And so as I've been going through this experience myself and going back to ancestral work, I've really been thinking about, you know, because when you're young, you know death exists, right? You experience death, but you don't really think of it in terms of your own mortality.
Hmm.
And that personally has been freaking me out. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God, this is it. I don't know what's on the other side. But it's also helped me understand, okay, there has to be something else, because I work with ancestors. And so I know that there's something else. And then it makes me really think about and reflect of what kind of ancestor do I want to be? And how can I live in this lifetime now so that I can become that ancestor? And who am I going to be an ancestor to? Not only to my family, my nephews, but, you know, students, people I work with. And so I'm really at the beginning stage of this because I just, for my own personal life, I just never thought I would live this long. I always thought I would die at a young age. And I did go through this spiritual death at that age that I thought I was going to die. So for a long time in my 30s, I was just confused. Like, why am I still here? I was just waiting for death to come. And now that I've surpassed that age, I'm like, oh, I think I'm supposed to live a little bit longer. And so I'm catching up on what it's like to enter this phase in life. But I do think facing your own mortality is where a lot of fear and our attachment comes from.
Yeah. Absolutely. Does the I want to say too, I actually have a friend that has had a similar experience of like feeling the death urge or the sense of death in her late 30s and trying to grapple with what that actually means while she's still living and thriving. So maybe a conversation to come back to when we have more time. But I also wonder if in the Eastern metaphysical perspective, if there is a thread, if there exists already a way of understanding or preparing people for ancestorhood, or is that something that's kind of unique to your own journey that you might bring into your work with clients?
A lot of it is how you live in your present life. You know, are you
Mm.
working with your own destiny? Are you working with alignment? The thing that East Asian cultures, we have three philosophies that is embedded in all of our culture. It's Taoism, where we look at observations in nature and we understand that the macrocosmic energy plays out inwards, and there's a microcosmic energy that we get to work with. Buddhism, which is about reaching enlightenment. But then there's also Confucianism, and that is the biggest thing that ties all of our culture together. And it's not the sexy philosophy because it's all about work hard, be a good person, be benevolent, and leave this world better than how you entered it, you know? And so that is the key thing in ancestral work. But there is all the spiritual side of what happens after death, how long it takes to become an ancestor, what happens to our body, what happens to our spirit. But in our belief that it does take a few years to become an ancestor, because when you make that transition, you don't really know where you are or what happened. And so that is also the reason why we, the living, do a lot of ancestral work to help them transition. And once they do, know that they can come back and there is a place. That's why we have altars and we have these rituals throughout the year, so that that space between the living and whatever that other world is, it's not blocked, you know.
Wow, that's such a different relationship to ancestors than, yeah, from the Western perspective, obviously, except our Day of the Dead, which isn't really, not really ours.
Yeah.
We're borrowing it. Yeah. We're nearing the end here. Dr. Tamsin, do you have any final words of wisdom for our audience that didn't naturally come up?
Um, I love this conversation. We kind of went all over the place. I wasn't expecting to go this way, but I loved it. Um, I think maybe the one advice that I can give is to be more curious rather
Mm,
than trying to find answers so quickly, and to
mm,
sit in that curiosity and sit in that space of the unknown. We talked about liminal space, because in that liminal space of unknown and pauses, there's so much wisdom. If we can just quiet the noise, and there is wisdom in knowing not, or there's wisdom in knowing that you don't know things, that you don't know which direction you can go to, because then the possibilities are limitless, and that your body will always tell you what to do. Your body is constantly giving you messages of slow down, take, work on your boundaries, stop your people pleasing, all of that. If we just listen to our body, and whenever we do feel the more challenging feelings like fear, shame, guilt, is to really approach it with kindness and tenderness. And that's hard. It's all of this is easier said than done, right? But if you just constantly remind yourself to approach yourself with a lot more tenderness, a lot more kindness, and to soften the way that you age, I think that will give you a path on how you can continue your journey.
amazing. Thank you so much for coming on again. And this was such an enriching conversation. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Yes, thanks so much. It's always great to talk with you and hear your perspective and feel how they all um are so interrelated, right? But then each of them has a really unique and clarifying perspective. So it's always great to talk with you.
Yeah, same here. I loved these conversations that we've had.
So, to everybody at home, you can learn more about Dr. Tamsin by looking into her. We have a bio and all her social links and her website in the YouTube text box. Same for me and Dr. A. And so, yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for your comments. Like, share, leave more comments, and subscribe to the channel. That's important. And yeah, don't hesitate to let us know what you think. And until next time. See you.
Goddess
See you.
matters. Yeah.
Goddess matters. Okay.
Thanks,
Ciao.
everyone.
Bye
Bye.
bye.